Okay, we're recording.
Hi, welcome to episode 7, which is entitled Alphabet, Acronym, and Abomination. We have 3 A's because we're going to cover some different things. And the first thing we're going to cover is we had a question of somebody who wanted to understand what the letters of the acronym mean, of the LGBT, AQA plus
XYZ.
Yeah, so that's why people are called the alphabet people, because it gets to be overwhelming, all these different letters. And so Chastity's going to try to explain each one of those for you today.
Yeah, did you want me to do that now or did
Yeah.
you? Okay.
Yeah, you're gonna do that first.
Okay. All right. So the modern term these days, the acronym is LGBTQIA plus, and so L refers to lesbian, which is a female gay person, a woman attracted to women, and gay, although usually used to refer to gay men, it could really refer to either. Personally, I don't think that we need 2 separate letters to represent gay people, but people got to pointlessly gender things. And then there's the bisexuals that are attracted to both men and women. That's pretty much that's how that is. And then transgender is not the same as the previous 3 because it's about identity and who you feel you are gender-wise and your personality, how it matches the stereotypes of the genders. So it's different, and I'm transgender. Now, queer is one of those things that's a little bit more vague because it's an umbrella term, and it can refer to people who they're not cisgender and they're not straight, but they are not sure what they are. They might be a hybrid. They might be non-binary, or they might be questioning. They may not know what category. It may just not fit into one of the other letters exactly. And then intersex is, as we mentioned before, people who are born with a biological condition. Their hormones or their chromosomes or their appearance of their body may have them be biologically a mix of male and female. That's not about identity so much, although they do have to figure out who they are because it's not as clear cut for them because their body is sending mixed signals to them and to the rest of the world, so people don't know what to call them.
Right. And
then asexual are people who lack the sexual attraction to people entirely. Generally, they're not really interested in sex with people. Now, they might still form relationships and they might want to marry someone, but it doesn't have to include that sexual component that people lump together with all these things. So I think in a way they're free they have more options to say in what they can do.
Now, A can also stand for ally, right?
Yes. Some people just like to have the A represent ally because they just might be an ally to the LGBT people. They're just their friend. They want to support them.
Like I am. I don't fit in those other categories, but I'm an ally. And I speak up and try to help people with those different letter categories. And you don't have to have any one of those be applied to you, but you can still be there for the other people and hopefully understand more what they need from you.
Yeah, and then the acronym usually ends with a plus sign because representing that, there's always going to be more. There's always going to be new things that arise that weren't foreseen previously, but the plus is meant to represent any future things.
Right. Well, that makes sense. And so that's about the alphabet and acronym thing. But I had also promised to start going over some of the scriptures that are questionable and that people use against LGBT people in the Bible and kind of start going over some of the meanings, including I mentioned that we would talk about the word abomination and what that meant in the Bible. And so I've been doing some research about all of that. And so the first part of this podcast is going to be me explaining a few things about that. And then at the end, there's some other things we want to talk to you about to wrap up. But I'm going to start by explaining about the word homosexual. The word homosexual was never in the original Bible. In the original Greek and Hebrew text, the word that is translated to homosexual in many Bibles is more accurately translated to pedophile or boy abuser or boy molester. The ancient world encouraged systemic pederasty, sexual relationships between an adult man and a younger boy, usually 8 to 12 years of age. According to theologian Ed Oxford, ancient Greek documents show us how even parents utilize this abusive system to help sons advance in society. For most of history, these verses were interpreted to be obviously referring to pederasty, not homosexuality. The shift to attack homosexuality in the 1980s was not only a calculated attack during a critical period such as the AIDS epidemic, which preachers were preaching was a punishment for homosexuals, but it ironically came from an institution with nearly 6,000 clergymen charged with sexual assault of young boys. So now here's a timeline about translations. In 1534, Martin Luther's original German translation includes, now I'm trying to say the German right, Knabenschneider, something like that, which means boy molester. And then 1800s, a German Bible reads, "Man shall not lie with young boys as he does with a woman. It is an abomination." Leviticus 18:22, and reads, "Boy molesters will not inherit the kingdom of God" in 1 Corinthians 6:9. In 1892, the Germans created the word homosexual. I'm trying to find the right card. I got a lot of cards here. Okay, that was 3, so here's 4. I knew I was going to have this problem with so many notes. Okay, in 1983, the American company Biblica paid for an updated German Bible that uses the word homosexual instead of boy molesters. This was later put into the English Bibles, which read, "Man shall not lie with man, for it is an abomination." Now that brings us to the word abomination. So now I got to find the right page for this. I did a lot of research, so that's why I have so many cards and notes here. Okay, abomination. The Hebrew word to'iva can refer to something that is ritually unclean or culturally abhorrent. It has to do with setting boundaries. God was trying to teach his people to live differently than the nations around them. So he prohibited many things that were parts of their idolatrous and evil ceremonies. Some of the prohibitions may seem silly to us, such as not cutting their hair and beards a certain way, or using different types of cloth in their clothing. However, these had to do with customs and rituals of the wicked nations around them. Many things were called an abomination. A man had the prohibition, this is a true story, a man put this prohibition about homosexuality, he had it tattooed on himself. and showing it off around to show that he condemned homosexuality, when in the same passage, just a few verses away from the homosexual passage, it talks about not getting tattoos, that also is prohibited. So he had a tattoo, not realizing that it called that an abomination, and then he's trying to show off with a tattoo how much he's against homosexuality. So, let's see where I'm at here. Abomination. Okay, I did all that. This is great. I had a feeling this was going to happen. Okay, so, anyway, I think I finished that part. The next part of our podcast is concerning how people lump certain things together, such as assuming that all transgender or feminist people are pro-abortion. And so first of all, I'm going to have Chastity show and talk about a book she wrote several years ago and explain a little bit about that. The thing is, we've noticed that people assume that if you're transgender, that means you believe in abortion and you're not pro-life. Well, we're both very pro-life. I also noticed that about being a feminist and trying to fight for women's rights. People assume that includes wanting people to kill their babies. And the truth is, and this is something that Chastity will bring out too, is that abortion hurts women too. And it's not one of these things where part of women's rights are to try to abort their babies. And when they do, they suffer great consequences physically, emotionally, mentally. And so there's some things that Chastity wants to say about that, about who's usually responsible about it. People talk about, well, how should we punish the mother if they kill their baby? No, there's other people involved that should be more likely to be punished if there was gonna be a punishment. So I'm going to let you take it from here with that subject.
Yeah, so I have the paperback of a book that I published in 2015. Now, the picture of the baby on the cover, that was one of Amazon's images that you could just pick. So I didn't have to upload an image, and it's a cute baby. So, but yeah, I published this book. It's Free Will and Abortion Denial. And I published this in 2015. And what I did with this book was kind of ambitious because I was trying to talk about two things at once. On one hand, I was philosophically talking about the impossibility of free will, but at the same time, I was trying to apply it to the abortion situation. And there's a few parts. It's a short book, but there's just a few paragraphs from this that I really like to read because I feel like they kind of represent what I was trying to get across here.
Can I clarify a little bit about the free will situation?
Yeah, sure, if you want.
See, a lot of people misunderstood what Chastity was trying to say, because basically a lot of people say, well, you have your free will, as though it's just random choices.
Yeah.
And she was really trying to point out that there's no such thing as free will. In other words, there are influences and there are backgrounds that lead up to certain choices. And so a lot of times she was misunderstood about the free will idea. So I wanted to clarify that because I understood after reading her book what she was really trying to say. And so we're not saying that people don't have choices, but at the same time, they're just not random. They're not like, oh, I just decided to do this today. And so that's what she's talking about when she said the impossibility of free will. There's always a cause and then a cause that causes that. And there are influences and pre-existing situations that lead us to make the choices we make.
Yes. For example, a term I like is causal will or deterministic will, or reasonable will. Basically the idea that we have a will, that we have desires, obviously, but there's reasons for that.
Right.
And to put the reason why we don't have a free will is that's why conversion therapy doesn't work. That's why straight people can't turn gay and gay people can't turn straight. And that's just a very basic way, but it's actually an ancient topic in philosophy. Many books, many podcasts, people have debated about the free will thing, but often the confusion is just from definition misunderstanding.
Yeah.
People are using two different definitions. Even the famous philosophers Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett, which are very famous philosophers, they are using entirely different definitions, and it's clear when you hear them do podcasts together.
Yeah.
They're talking about entirely different things. I feel like they agree more than they disagree. But basically, I'm trying to get the point across that free will is an excuse to not look at the causes of why things are happening. People use, I just chose my free will, meaning they don't know why they're doing what they're doing because they haven't looked at the causes.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. So if we understand that women are not freely choosing abortion and that they are caused to do so by forces outside of their control, then we can more effectively reduce the number of abortions. The reason for doing so should be obvious. If you see abortion as murder, then you're motivated to do whatever will prevent it. If you do not agree that abortion is murder, then you will dismiss everything I have to say. The message I am trying to communicate is for people who already see abortion as the crime that it is, but who may not know how to fight against it. If humans have what is called a free will, we cannot make a difference. A person with free will would be able to freely choose whatever they want, no matter what someone says or does. To have a free will is to be free from causality or determinism. If I didn't believe that I could change the minds of people on abortion, I would not spend all the time I do debating them. So the basic idea there is that if people had a free will, then nothing you would say or do would ever matter. You wouldn't influence anybody. But the fact that people do change as they learn information means that information will change people's mind on a situation. And also it's important to mention that women are choosing abortion because of forces outside the control that they don't want to. If you're choosing what you don't want to do, then how is that your choice? That's another problem. But this really fits in with sexism, and near the end of this same book, there's another part that about sexism against women that I wanted to mention here. Let's see. I believe that a required step to make in reducing abortion is to promote gender equality. Instead of teaching men that women exist only to be their slaves, the men must learn to treat them as equals in every possible way. What I am saying is that no form of sexism should be tolerated anywhere. Boys are not better than girls, and girls are no better than boys. Whatever differences they have are not their choice anyway. There are certain traditions that automatically imply that men have a type of ownership over women. An example is the idea that when a man and woman get married, the woman must change her last name to that of her husband. Why is this? Is this a hint that we expect a woman to conform to the traditions of her husband's family? Another form of sexism that bothers me is sex selection abortion. It shows that someone has a hatred of a certain gender. The causes of this should be looked into rather than just allowing them to continue killing people of that gender. As long as sexism, racism, speciesism, or any other tradition of hating a group of living things continues, the effect will be violence. Killing someone because they are different from you in size, level of development, or degree of dependency is as insane as killing them for having a different gender, skin color, species, or religion. In this way, I see abortion as a form of discrimination that is not something I can accept, just as I can't accept those other forms of discrimination. So what I'm saying is that abortion is caused because of sexism, because of gender inequality, and the fact that there's even such a thing as sex selection abortion. So people are getting the karyotype test, trying to test what sex they believe the baby is, so they know if they want to kill it. Like if it's a girl, they might want to kill it, or if it's a boy, they might want to kill it. So that the reason that people want to know the gender of the child is so they can kill it. And what does that tell you about sexism right there? You know, so as an LGBT person, basically, to me, being against abortion is all part of the same framework of ethics, because it's discrimination. To discriminate against somebody because they're a baby and they haven't had a chance to do anything wrong yet, just because you don't like whatever gender they might be, or you might not like the fact, some people might want someone to abort because somebody committed adultery and got pregnant by somebody who wasn't their spouse or something like that. But that has nothing to do with the baby. And why is the baby punished? And this is where it gets very important, because people assume that the LGBTQIA people are all pro-choice. And why would they even think that? There's no logical reason. Like, why does me being transgender, why would that be like, well, I'm a woman now, I guess I gotta kill babies? Like, what? Like, that doesn't work. And but also, this is a very important topic, because the reason I named myself Chastity was over this very issue. Because to me, it was only logical. Well, people only have abortions because they get pregnant, and if people don't have sex, then nobody gets pregnant. And so a life of celibacy is the way to make sure I'm never responsible for an abortion. And I thought about that years ago. I thought about that, in my early 20s. I thought, well, wait a minute. Even if I had been straight, and even if I had wanted to have sex with a woman, then that leads to a whole complicated mess of, well, if she gets pregnant, will she abort the child? How do I know? What will happen there? And that puts that in her hands, whoever this fictional woman is, and then there would be nothing I could do. And I feel like if you are a straight or bisexual man who's even considering that will keep you awake at night. That will scare you, thinking, because I would not want to be responsible for the murder of someone. And that's how I view it. Is I view the person who is getting the person pregnant, who doesn't want to be pregnant, then they're responsible, because then that abortion would not have occurred had they not gotten that person pregnant.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I remember in that book is you point out that usually it's the man who wants the abortion.
Yes.
And that they're acting like, oh, women are so terrible. On the whole, it's the fathers, or even most abortion doctors are doing it to make money. And so how are we going to hold women, primarily responsible just because they're the ones that got pregnant?
Right.
And so, and then also you were mentioning earlier to me that you've heard people say, and was that in your book, about thinking of like the baby being like a parasite, like they chose.
Oh yeah.
They chose to have the woman get pregnant, and they're there, like they're causing the trouble, the baby that supposedly isn't even a person yet, according to a lot of abortion believers.
Yeah, in fact, I should read that part here.
I think you should.
I believe that many people deny that abortion is murder because they are afraid to challenge the beliefs and traditions they have been given by their culture. One of the most harmful beliefs is that of free will. If we believe that a baby chose to implant itself in the uterus, then it is possible to blame the baby and punish it for the crime of existing. I know that sounds crazy, but some people do that. If we believe that the mother chose to get pregnant all by herself and then chose to kill the child, then we might be tempted to call her a murderer and punish her without looking at preventing the circumstances that pushed her and many other women to seek abortions. Yeah.
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 And I've noticed that on the whole, it's usually the man that pressures the woman to go get an abortion, and will even pay for it sometimes, just so they don't have to take responsibility for the child. So there's a lot of things, and then what we were just talking about, a lot of people who believe in abortion say, well, that's not really a person yet. They're not a person until they're born, or they're not a person, when they're small and inside the womb. And, and then they contradict themselves by saying, well, they're a parasite. They're trying to take the life out of that woman. Isn't that awful? But anyhow, I want us to look at something. I'm going to tell a little story. And then there is a scripture that I want to end with that has to do with the subject. Before I got pregnant with Chandler, which is this person here who we call Charity, Chastity.
Yeah, Charity's my sister.
Yeah, I had a Charity, okay, and then we adopted a boy, and his name was Donnie. And then I was still feeling like we were supposed to have another child, and we were praying about it. I wasn't able to get pregnant because I wasn't ovulating at that time. But I kept feeling like I should keep praying because I was supposed to have another kid. And one time we were at a church service where there was a man there that, was kind of a prophet, and he said, is anybody here, he says, there's a couple here that want to be able to have a child, and you need to come forward for prayer. And so we did, and he prayed over us, and then he got this prophecy, and it's based on the scripture that I'm going to read. Because he was praying, he was talking as though the child we would end up having was going to be kind of like a prophet in the last days. And he was comparing this child to Jeremiah the prophet. And this is the scripture he was referring to. This is at the very beginning of the book of Jeremiah, and it tells about when God was calling Jeremiah to be a prophet and proclaim things to his people. It says in verse 4 of chapter 1, then the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. Then said I, Ah, Lord God, behold, I cannot speak, for I am a child. But the Lord said unto me, say not I am a child, for thou shalt go to all that I shall send thee, and whatsoever I command thee thou shalt speak. Be not afraid of their faces, for I am with thee to deliver thee, saith the Lord. Then the Lord put forth his hand and touched my mouth. And the Lord said unto me, behold, I have put my words in thy mouth. Well, see, this reference was mentioned. And I actually do have a tape recording, I'm not sure where it is, that was made that night at this church when the guy was praying over us. And he references that and said that, God already knows this child. And see, I hadn't even conceived the child yet. And yet God already had Chandler in his mind and what kind of person he was going to be. And then created him and formed him in my womb later on, because I did get pregnant after praying about all this, and I wasn't ovulating. I wasn't even on fertility drugs, which I had to be on when I got pregnant with my daughter, my other daughter. And so anyway, it was definitely a miracle. But even before that, when I'd be praying about it, I felt like God was already showing me. I was kind of getting a vision of what kind of kid this would be. Now, mind you, I hadn't even conceived him yet. But I could sense the personality, and that he was going to be funny and make me laugh. And even when this vision came to me, I started laughing. And it was kind of like the story of Isaac in the Bible, where both Abraham and Sarah, they were promised to be able to have a child in their old age, and they both laughed at different times. about it. And so then they named him Isaac, which means laughter. Well, after that point, I felt like that if I had a boy, we had already picked out the name Chandler, but I felt like I was supposed to make his middle name Isaac. And as a testimony to how God had, first of all, he was a miracle child, just like Isaac was. And he was a person that was going to be kind of a comedian and would make me laugh. And when I went through all those years after the divorce and raising him by myself, that kid, he just kept me laughing. And he brought joy and laughter to me. And so that scripture and the way God did all that shows that that person is already a person in God's mind. So how could it be okay after he forms that person that he already has created in his mind ahead of time? How could it ever be God's will for people to kill that child, to abort it for any reason? Because God does have a plan and a purpose, and people sometimes do choose to murder, at all different ages. But it's not like that wasn't a person that God was creating and that he had in mind and had a plan for them. And so anyway, the idea is that we cannot have that attitude of it's okay. Now, if somebody is not able to raise their child, I've known some very good people who made the choice because they were not able to take care of that child to give that child up for adoption. And they were able to be placed in a good home. And I've talked to mothers, one that was way too young and going through a lot of stuff. And she did have some other children later that she was able to raise. But she said it was the best thing she ever did was to give that baby up for adoption, and then some good people adopted the child and raised him, and later on she was back in touch and was really glad that instead of aborting the baby, she didn't believe in that at all. She was very pleased that she'd done the right thing and that that child was able to be raised in a good home. And there's nothing wrong with that, because sometimes God calls somebody to adopt a child and raise them. And I have an adopted child, and I knew that I was supposed to adopt him. And I felt like, this was a commission from God. And so I just know that sometimes God does call people. And especially if the original parents are not able to raise that person, there are people that God calls to help raise that child so they can reach the destiny that he has for them. Did you want to say anything about that too? Oh, tell about the other prophecy you got later.
Yeah, absolutely. But before that, I just want to mention that yes, it was the right thing that you adopted my brother. Oh, my 3:30 alarm is going off my phone. Look, hold on, I gotta shut up my phone.
You tried to turn it off, but you forgot about your alarm.
Yeah, the alarm that's supposed to wake me up at 3:30 if all else fails. Yeah, sorry, I have a 3:30 alarm to make sure on weekdays that I catch my Oats ride to get here. So otherwise, I'll miss it. Anyway, as I was saying, so. In the event that my brother ever listens to this podcast, I just want him to know that it was the right thing that you were adopted into our family. And I just want you to know that regardless of everything that's happened in the past, that doesn't mean that you are less than I or Charity that were born biologically into the family. I'm very much a believer that
yes.
An adopted member is an equal member.
True.
As a biological one. And a lot of people, they just don't understand that.
Yeah. And the thing is, I knew I was supposed to raise him, and I have the same attitude. And when I adopted Donnie, I made the same commitment to him that I did to my other children when they were born. And now that doesn't mean you can always raise them the same way, because sometimes they have problems, especially if you adopt an older child like I did. They have damage done to them through the years in different ways. And so you have to start with what they need from you at the time. And all your children have different needs anyway, and you have to raise them according to what they need the most. And it was very difficult. I did the right thing, and I did everything I could to try to make sure I did a good job of raising that child as much as my other two. But that's true that I still saw that person and still see him as my child. Mm-hmm. And I still have the same commitment, but things happen and people have choices, and like we were saying, they're not random choices, but they are choices. And so as long as I know I did what I was supposed to do, that hopefully, it was so God could give him a chance to grow up and know him, and I hope that someday that child is also going to be in heaven. And so I will never quit believing for that and praying for that. And so that's true. I made the same commitment, and there is nothing wrong with adopting a child. And if you can't take care of them, it's much better to give them up for adoption and let God bring the right parents into their life that can help them to grow up like they need to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so anyway, about the prophecy, I was at the pastor's wife's house.
This was a different prophecy.
Yeah.
Because now this is when he's a lot older than not being conceived yet.
Yeah, I was about probably 25 years old, and I was at the pastor and his wife's house of Life Christian Center, and they had this guy from Africa, this missionary from Africa, whatever, and he had a kind of an accent, but he spoke English and all that, and he was praying over people and he was prophesying and stuff, and he said that he saw I was going to have a big ministry with computers and media and stuff, and DJ was laughing the whole time because this guy from Africa, he didn't know anything about me. He didn't know that I was a computer genius, but DJ knew, and he was laughing, and he's like, "This is so accurate." Because here I do computer programming, and I make websites with HTML, and I do all sorts of stuff, and I'm just starting to see more and more as time goes on how whatever it is that I'm doing, I have the unique skills, I have the unique brain that's perfectly designed for it.
That's exactly why we're able to do what we're doing now.
Yeah.
With these podcasts. This was a prophecy that really began to come true, that who was Chandler, now Chastity, was going to have a ministry with computers. Mm-hmm. And it's true, he was just such a computer nerd, taught himself so much. He didn't even have a computer for years, and then just got right, after we were able to get one, he just went crazy with it. He's taught himself so much. But anyway, so that was way back then, and at the time, you weren't even sure what to believe about God, but you got that prophecy. Yeah. And it stuck with you that someday you were supposed to have a ministry with computers. Well, that's happening right now. Because now we're doing these podcasts. God's leading us to do it. I don't have any ability as far as technology at all. And I couldn't do this at all. And I couldn't get my voice out there and explain things to people if we didn't have Chastity, who knows all about this stuff. And God's still giving him more and more ideas to share with the world, and how to make this successful and how to reach out to the rest of the world. So, and if I say he and then she, it's because I'm a mother who's had both. I've had someone who was a he that's now a she, and so don't worry about the pronouns, because I'm I'm a flustered mother.
My poor old mother is just so confused. She doesn't know what the hell I am.
When you raise somebody as one thing and then there's somebody else, I tend to go back and forth. Sometimes I say him, and call him my son and Chandler, and then I switch around and say my daughter Chastity, and I'll say him, and then I'll say her, and then I'll say he, and then I'll say she. So don't worry about it. I mean, and fortunately, Chastity understands that and doesn't get offended like some transgender people do, partly because she knows that I'm doing the best I can. And that parents can get confused when they've raised them most of the way as one thing. And it's not that I'm not supportive in any way. I'm an ally, but I do get a little...
and on that note, I have to say, multiple times, somebody else who is not me and who is not you wants to criticize my mother because she can't get my pronouns right. And I'm like... Look, when other people are getting offended because they think that you're misgendering me, when really you're just too confused to know what's going on here.
Well, when you've raised somebody as a boy, and now they're a girl, but then they're kind of both sometimes too, because it's a mixture. And so it gets difficult in the English language because some languages don't have those kind of pronouns to confuse you.
Look, I thank God that I can't have kids, because if I had kids, I would go through the same thing. I would not be able to keep it straight what they are from one day to the next either.
See, and really, I don't care if it's a he or a she, because I love my baby, and that goes back to the abortion thing.
Yeah.
I would love her no matter what she is, and I think all parents should have that attitude.
Yeah, because if you love your child for what it is, then you're not going to try to find out what sex they are so you can abort them.
Right, yeah, and you should still love them just the same. I just needed to know what I was supposed to do, raising a boy or a girl, and I've had a mixture of both girls and boys, and this one was a mixture all the way around.
Yeah, well, and here's one of the strangest things. Now, this is when I knew that I had an encounter with God, when I spoke with Honesty the Unicorn. Now, this is extremely weird. I think it's in part 5 or 6 of my Chandler's Honesty series. This is very weird because I've often gone back and forth like, well, I really shouldn't exist, like I don't belong here, and I just like, well, a lot of times I've even said like, well, I'm just here because my parents had sex. My life has no meaning and all that, and sometimes it's easy to slip into that mindset. But then I also have other evidence. There's the prophecy, which is basically mentioned twice, and I'm seeing now how I'm uniquely designed for the things that I'm doing. Like our books and our podcast wouldn't exist if I wasn't the one buying computers and using them for you when you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so it's a very strange situation because Honesty made me promise to never say that I should never have been born or that I don't belong here.
Mm-hmm.
Which is strange because it was at that moment that I'm like, well, here, the way I was believing and feeling at the time was very much opposite. I was feeling worthless. I was like, there's no point to me being here.
Yeah.
And so it's a very mysterious situation because here Honesty said I was a hypocrite because here I'm fighting for the rights of other people to not be aborted, for other people to live their lives, and yet then I was dismissing my own value, my own worth, and saying that my life didn't matter. Why would the lives of these babies that I don't know matter, but mine doesn't? So I was hating myself in the way that other people are hating these babies that are innocent and they don't know. But I had to realize, wait, I'm one of those innocent babies too. Mm-hmm. And when I made that connection, because Honesty pointed it out, because I have a steaming pile of horseshit mind and was too stupid to know it, So honestly,
You have to read the books to know why you say that.
you gotta read the books, man. You gotta read the Chandler's Honesty series, because by the time you get done reading that, your mind will be a steaming pile of horse shit too.
Yeah.
Worst book advertisement ever.
Yeah, well, you'd understand if you read it.
Yeah.
And you'd get a lot of laughs, but a lot of truth in there.
And
how God revealed himself to him.
And just like the Bible, you got to understand it in its historical context.
Right. Well, and you're talking about how you felt worthless. See, that's a lot of what happens that causes people to get suicidal. Like we talked about that one time. And the thing is, we're going to go back over some of those things next week about depression and suicide, because we actually are planning on having a guest with us who wants to tell her story to try to encourage people, because she struggled with some of these things, and so she's really trying to reach out and help people too. And so we're going to have another person help us do this, and we're excited about that. And so that we're going to cover some of that ground again next week, so that she can tell her story as well.
Yes. Yeah, she listens to all of our podcasts. She's inspired by us.
She's our big fan, and I thought she'd be too shy to do this, but it's given her such a purpose, and she's really coming out of her shell, and she really wants to share with the world what she's been through, so that people know they're not alone. And the more people that can tell their story, the more we can reach people that think they're all alone and going through this kind of thing. And so she's trying to get the word out and help people understand those kinds of things as well. So we appreciate everybody that follows us, and hopefully you're learning a lot and you're helping us to express ourselves and tell things that we've been needing to share with the world. And like I said, because of Chastity and her technical knowledge, years ago I felt like I was supposed to reach out to the world. I thought, how am I going to have worldwide ministry? Well, look, I ended up having a child who was a genius about this kind of thing, and now together we're making it happen, and we feel really good about knowing that we can reach out to people all over the place that can receive help from these podcasts.
Yeah. And also, I wanted to thank my sister Charity and her husband Darwin, because Charity messaged me on Facebook and said they're praying for me, because they know that because of the recent transgender shooter, then people are going to think that I'm some kind of dangerous person who's going to go into schools and shoot children just because I'm transgender.
Yeah, see, that this is what keeps happening in the news. People are calling all transgender people terrorists now, because one person, with all the shootings we've had through the years, and most of them were straight.
Yeah.
And now there's one transgender person that did it, and it's like, oh, well, these transgender people are so bad. They're terrorists. Let's get rid of them. And how's that any different than Nazi Germany?
I know, isn't it strange that instead of doing anything about the guns, instead they want to shoot the transgender people with guns.
Yeah. And they're wanting to punish the doctors that helped anybody transition in any way.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, they're kind of missing the point.
Yeah.
And it's just really ludicrous. But any excuse to blame any group of people and make them look like they're really, really bad. Anything pops up in the news, they're just looking for any excuse to condemn somebody for being different from the way they think people ought to be.
Yeah.
And so this is just something that's just, occurred. But there's a lot of violence against transgender people anyway. And now this is like designed to make it look like Boy, we just need to get rid of those people.
Yeah. And and this is one thing about me that's a little bit different than most people, because a lot of people are very concerned with, with their writing or their programming and stuff. They think about how they're going to make money off of things. And yeah, that's great if you can make money. But almost everything I do is stuff I'm giving away for free. Because what's the point of, copywriting things and having, ownership of patent and trademarks and copyright, and well, this is mine and you can only use it if you pay me.
Yeah.
What's the point if any day I could be walking to my job at Walmart and someone could just shoot me dead? Because after I'm dead, money's not going to do me any good. And just yesterday, I was looking at the lyrics of something I wrote. I turned it into a song. It's called the Prayer of Saint Chastity, and it was a song I wrote to God a night when I was sick and I was trying to work at Walmart and I was just really sick, and God told me to go home. God told me that I needed to go home that night and get some sleep, and I needed to write too, because there were higher priorities, and I was too sick to be working at Walmart. I was just getting everybody else sick around me, and that was because I was so focused on money. And so I wrote this big old song about it, and about and that verse in Matthew, lay not for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and thieves break into steal, but lay up for yourself treasures in heaven.
Yeah.
Where your heart is, there your treasure is there, your heart will be also. I can't remember it all. I have it all written down on the computer, but I know the gist of it basically. Yeah. And I just think that's very important, because what I do, the lives I touch through our podcast and what I write, if it means something to anybody, that will last longer than my life will.
Yes. And see, that's what it's all about. We don't really care about money. I know the books I've written, I just want to get them out there to help people. Mm-hmm. Particularly my book about suicide. I don't care a thing about money. I would give it away to anybody that's really wanting to know how to help other people or how to get the help themselves. And so I just wish that it would get out there and help people. That's what it's about. Mm-hmm. So anyway, how do we end this? Well, we talked about a lot of stuff again.
I know. Hard to believe it's still been less than an hour.
Yeah. But we're trying to answer questions like about the acronym, the meaning of it, and I'm trying to go over some of these scriptures. We'll go in more depth about some of these scriptures that are used against LGBT people. And there's several more that we need to go over, but I thought this would be a good start for helping to bring some understanding about how things were mistranslated and how that's caused a lot of misunderstanding and using it against people and making them feel bad, like God doesn't love them because they're an abomination. So we're trying to find out what that really means and try to find out what it really is all about.
Right, and if I remember correctly what you were saying, something was an abomination and when it was the same as one of those practices of the other neighboring religions, what they thought they had to do. So and without that understanding of what was going on there and the reason behind it, it just looks like a bunch of arbitrary rules that make no sense. Right,
and so that's why we need to open it up and help people understand it better. And like even that one about the tattoos, the context of that, it's apparently some of the nations around used to cut themselves and stamp things on their body, and they were doing it for the dead, because it says don't cut yourself for the dead and all. So really the context isn't so much the tattoos or anything are evil, but it prohibits it because that was a custom as part of that pagan religion to do that for the dead. And so that's in there, and there's a lot of things like that that make more sense when you understand what was going on around them and how God was trying to bring them out of that and cause them to do differently and be set apart from the customs of the world that were born out of wicked practices.
Mm-hmm.
So, have we clarified a few things today?
I think we did. I think we talked about a lot.
We sure did. So hopefully God can bless that, and the people out there can benefit from that, and we just feel really good about what we're doing because we feel like this is something that God wanted us to do, and He's been preparing both of us to do it for a long time.
Yeah.
Okay, so
all right.
Should we sign off?
All right. Goodbye, everybody. Have a fabulous day.